Okay, so I'll do the coloring tutorial with this since it's already ready, and it's a commission that I'm working on and kill two birds with one stone. So let me just put all these in a layer. So the first step that I do is I select the area around it so I can make a clipping layer. It helps you stay inside the lines basically. So this character, he has a really dark color palette, and usually what I like to do is lighten it up a little bit just because it is a lot easier to make look better. So I do the base color first, and then I do the hair. Okay, and then now that I have that, I will deselect and do a gradient with the hair where it goes from about like that, like dark to light basically. Just a really faint one. It doesn't need to be too apparent. And then, yeah, basically just do all the base colors. Bloop. Also, usually I don't have my lines as directly black because I just feel like colored lines do look a little better. However, it could be flat, or you could like go through and color all the lines. That usually takes a while, and it usually doesn't look as good as I ever hope it to. Anyway, so there's most of the base color. After that, I do airbrush for like some of the skin. Blush. If it was like a human, it'd be red. Let me at least make it a little warmer, just because you kind of reflect that they have blood. And then usually I lower the opacity of that layer. And then, depending on how I'm feeling, I will put all of the color layers, like the base color layers for the clipping and the gradients, in one layer. Or I will put the whole thing in a group layer and put a multiply layer on top of that. But today I think I want to keep the lines the same. So I'm going to do a multiply layer over the layer that has the color, just so it doesn't like mess up the lines. Multiply is really nice because you can pick one color and it has consistent like coloring shading. Like, see how it's applying the same like hue. Multiply is really good for that, and it speeds things up. You don't have to pick specific colors, and I think it makes it look better because things are more consistent. I usually go really light unless I'm doing like dramatic shading, in which case it's a bit different. Sorry about the birds. So typically when I'm shading, I have the main primary, I guess before I finish the multiply, I have the main primary lighting from the top, and I almost always make it yellow. It can be any color you want, but I usually do yellow just because I think it looks the best. And then depending on how bold, brave, or adventurous, I'll do like one blue from like this angle, and then if I'm feeling like adventurous, I'll do another color, and I'll get to that in a minute. Usually after this, I pick a lighter color, like really close to white but not quite white. If it was like a watercolor brush, like a painting brush that mixes, I would do white with multiply, because then it will mix everything to the normal shade. Then it transitions a little better. Sometimes I'm not like too content with how light or dark the multiply layer is. Usually fixing opacity can help with that. If it's too light and you're already at 100% opacity, at least in a lot of programs you can change the end value. And I usually just turn the brightness down, sometimes the saturation up. The more saturated something is, the more dark it's gonna look, I feel. Like grays usually feel a lot lighter than something of full saturation. Sorry, the birds are being really noisy. Okay, that like mostly takes care of it. I'll lower the opacity a bit just so it blends a little better, and then I do a new layer with add, and then I use this color. And sometimes I'm like, okay, that's not satisfying, so I usually do it really orange or yellow. Even at that, I think for darker colors you want to make it a little more bright and less saturated. And then I never have my add layer at 100% opacity because that makes it super bright. You can also use overlay, soft light, or dodge for these. or hard light, but hard light is more for the other two. And then for the next part, I typically do hard light, which I usually change to a different layer, but hard light is the easiest for me to see how things are going to look for the most part. And I think of the light source coming in like that. The reason why I think it's so simple, like you can see how quick I'm doing it. I know that I'm going to be like speeding it up for the video. But like really, if you know how the different blending styles work, you can get stuff done really quickly and make it look like pretty decent. And then I will lower that opacity or turn it to soft light at 100% opacity. And then I will do one more hard light layer with the pink and go through and do that. Sometimes I don't get it entirely right, but like I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. Like where the shades and shadows and stuff. The idea is to have fun with it. So overlay is a little bit better when it is a lighter palette. Soft light is good. Soft light and hard light. Hard light at a lower opacity. They're good for a darker palette because they show up a little bit better. Oh, I did highlights for the hair, not for the body. I do the same add layer for that. Just usually at a different opacity, usually a little bit less than the hair. Usually at this point, I do the eyes and highlights. So with eyes, I typically dark on the top, usually a circle. You want them to be more or less equal. Light on the bottom, also usually a circle. And then for the highlights, I usually go over the lines, like on top. But I don't really like going overlap unless I have if I have a background, I usually will, but. And then for highlights, I don't always do white, but rarely, sometimes for like eye highlights, but I can't think of really anything else that I use white on, aside from like mistakes on clothing. Like if I'm doing a white blouse, sometimes I forget to like make it a little blue. For highlights, it doesn't typically matter, but for the shading method, multiply, overlay, and add don't really show up very well. Like they kind of are a little bit grosser on just like actual white. For highlights, I don't even think about this color. I usually just do where it looks like there's overlap and it's hard to tell the difference. The biggest goal, I feel, when you're coloring is to put as much focus on the face as possible, or like focus on where you want the focus to be. Sometimes I look at a drawing and I'm like, oh, it feels like it's all blending together a little bit. I need to make the face a little more apparent. And what I can do with that is more contrast. So like with the multiply, you can do a little darker around it like this. I sometimes do white for the highlights on the hair, but in a piece that's as dark as this one, I don't think it's needed. Anyways, so usually when it's something like this, I'm like, it needs a little bit more pop. And so what I'll do is I will make a dodge layer. Well, first I'll do the burn. Burn is really good for subsurface scattering. I'm not very good at knowing how that actually works, so a lot of times it doesn't really turn out very good. But like if you pick the base color and turn up the saturation all the way, with burn, hold on, why isn't it working? That's blur. It can sort of make it look like there's depth. So like right there, I've read that it's like best where it goes from extreme highlights to extreme shadow. Sometimes I just put it nilly-willy everywhere, like where any highlights are. I don't know if that works out. You want to lower the opacity down to like 5% or 7%. Then I'll do the dodge layer. And all of these are clipping because I don't really want it to overlap very much. And do the high saturation of like orange. I like doing the dodge for the eye. It's good to put it like where the highlights are, I feel. And then also I turn the opacity down by a little bit. This is also a reason why I don't make my lines black, because the dodge, it looks really weird if you do. There you go. And with that, I think we're for the most part finished. Sometimes I color the lines, but I'm not really bothered to do it today. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I know it's kind of quick, but yeah, see ya.